I need to talk to you about what just happened in Berea, because if you blinked during day 3 of Brown's training camp, you missed the moment this quarterback competition actually started to tilt. I've been watching this Sanders versus Watson situation unfold for weeks now, and I've tried to stay patient with it, tried to give both guys a fair shake. But what Shedeur Sanders did today is not something I can just brush past. So let's get into it. 20 completions on 26 attempts. That's not a typo. That's roughly 80% accuracy against a real NFL defense, with 0 interceptions attached to it. And I want you to sit with that number for a second, because raw stats in training camp usually mean very little to me. Guys pad their numbers against backups all the time. But this wasn't empty production. This was a young quarterback taking chances downfield, testing tight windows, and still walking away clean. That combination is rare, and when I see it, I pay attention. Here's the thing that really stands out to me. Shedeur wasn't playing it safe out there. He wasn't dumping the ball off to protect his completion percentage or checking down just to keep the chains moving. He was pushing throws into contested space, attacking defenders, and doing it with a level of poise that honestly caught me off guard. Young players in his position usually panic a little when the lights get brighter. They either get too conservative or they start forcing everything trying to prove a point. Shedeur did neither. He let the game come to him and then he struck when the window opened. That's veteran-level patience from a guy who's only played 1 real season of professional football. And every single clean rep he put together did something to this quarterback room. It applied pressure. Every accurate throw made the next one matter more. Every smart decision made it harder for the coaching staff to look past him. Cleveland wanted real competition when they brought him in, and what they're getting right now might be more aggressive than anyone in that building expected. Now let's talk about Deshaun Watson, because I can't tell this story without addressing the other side of it. Watson threw another interception. Another one. And look, I understand training camp mistakes happen. Nobody's perfect in August. I get that. But this competition isn't happening in a vacuum. Every single turnover from Watson lands differently when it's sitting right next to a younger quarterback who's protecting the football and building momentum in real time. Watson still flashes that athletic ability, the movement outside the pocket, the arm angles most quarterbacks simply don't have. That part of his game hasn't disappeared. But the Browns can't make a franchise-altering decision based on a handful of impressive scrambles. They need stability. They need command of the huddle. And right now, that stability is coming from the guy who's supposed to still be learning the position. Here's what makes this so uncomfortable for Cleveland. Watson is the one with the contract, the resume, the experience that's supposed to set the standard. He's supposed to be the guy the young players are chasing. Instead, it's Shedeur who's becoming the name everyone's talking about after practice wraps. It's Shedeur creating the moments people want to rewatch. And when the more experienced quarterback keeps turning the ball over, while the guy with 1 year under his belt keeps stacking clean, aggressive performances, that word experience starts to lose its weight. It stops sounding like an advantage and starts sounding like an excuse. There's also a psychological layer to this that I don't think gets talked about enough. Every time Shedeur puts together a rep like the ones we saw today, it adds weight to Watson's shoulders, whether anyone in that building wants to admit it or not. Watson knows the coaches are charting every single decision he makes. He knows the media is sitting there waiting for the next mistake to write about. He knows that every clean drive from the other side of that quarterback room turns into another round of questions about whether the team made the right call handing him that contract. That kind of pressure can make a veteran quarterback press even harder than he normally would, chasing home run plays instead of simply taking what the defense gives him. And that's usually when careless turnovers start piling up. I haven't seen Shedeur playing with that same weight on him. If anything, it looks like he's using the doubt as fuel instead of letting it slow him down. Every question about whether he's ready becomes another opportunity for him to answer it on the field instead of in a press conference. And that's a dangerous dynamic for Watson, because momentum in a quarterback competition doesn't move gradually. It shifts fast once teammates start believing in someone. Receivers start running their routes with a different kind of urgency because they trust the ball is coming. The huddle starts to feel different. Coaches start finding excuses to get a certain player more first-team snaps because the results are speaking louder than the pecking order. I'm not saying that's fully happened yet in Berea, But I am saying the early signs of that shift are visible if you know what you're looking for, and Day 3 added another layer to it. I know some of you are going to say I'm overreacting to one practice. Fair. Training camp doesn't decide anything by itself, and I want to be clear about that. But I also can't ignore what I'm seeing develop here, especially when it comes to one specific connection that's forming right in front of our eyes. Denzel Boston. Write that name down if you haven't already, because what's happening between him and Shedeur is starting to look like something real. This wasn't one lucky grab or a fluke connection on a broken play. This looked like two guys who already trust each other enough to attack a defense without hesitating. And that kind of trust usually takes months, sometimes years, to build between a quarterback and a receiver. These two are flashing it in their first training camp together. Think about what that actually requires. Shedeur has to see the matchup, recognize it instantly, and throw with total conviction that Boston is going to be exactly where he needs to be. Boston has to run his route with the belief that if he wins his leverage, the ball is coming, no matter how tight the coverage looks. When both of those things line up, you get moments where the quarterback isn't waiting for a receiver to be wide open before letting it go. He's throwing before the break, trusting the process completely. That's advanced level chemistry for players this early in their relationship, and it's exactly what turns ordinary camp reps into the kind of plays that make people rise out of their seats. Think about how rare that actually is inside a training camp setting. Most quarterback-receiver duos spend their first camp together just trying to survive install meetings, learning terminology, figuring out footwork on specific route concepts. What I'm watching from Shedeur and Boston looks like it's already past that stage. They're operating like a pairing that's been through actual football games together, not just walkthroughs and install periods. And when a quarterback finds that kind of trust with a receiver this early, it tends to snowball. Defensive coordinators start having to account for it in their coverage shells. Safeties shade a little more toward that side of the field. Cornerbacks start playing with less confidence, knowing the quarterback isn't afraid to challenge them. One real connection can quietly reshape how an entire defense has to approach a game plan. One throw in particular stood out to me. Shedeur, under pressure in his face, still stepped into a tight window and delivered a ball perfectly placed between a cornerback and a safety, hitting his receiver before he'd even fully come out of his break. That's anticipation. That's a quarterback trusting what he sees instead of waiting for confirmation. People have been saying for a while that Shedeur can't read defenses at a high level, that he can't fit balls into small windows against legitimate NFL athletes. Today, on that specific rep, he answered that criticism without saying a single word. And I have to bring up Casey Kinchin too, because people wrote him off, said he couldn't separate, said he couldn't be a factor. Shedeur clearly didn't get that memo, and neither did Kinchin, because that duo is starting to build something of their own on the side. It's not just Boston benefiting from this version of Shedeur. Kayshon Boutte is getting easy access underneath because Shedeur understands when to attack deep and when to simply take what the defense gives him. That balance, knowing when to go for the kill shot and when to just move the chains, is something a lot of young quarterbacks never figure out. Shedeur is already showing signs of it in year 2. Now, I do want to be balanced here, because not everything was perfect. There's a real conversation happening about Shedeur's tendency to hold the ball a beat too long or tuck it and try to create something with his legs when the pocket collapses. Part of that comes down to the offensive line still finding its footing. There was pressure coming from multiple angles in earlier practices this week, and that's going to happen with a line that hasn't gelled yet. But it's worth noting, because if Cleveland is going to hand him the keys to this offense, he needs to speed up that internal clock even further. Processing quicker, getting the ball out on rhythm even when things aren't clean up front, that's usually the single biggest jump between a rookie season and year 2. And based on everything I'm seeing, that jump appears to be happening in real time. Let's talk about what this means for Todd Monken's offense as a whole, because I think this is bigger than just two quarterbacks fighting for reps. This scheme leans heavily on spread formations, a lot of one back, one tight end, 3 receiver looks, which honestly isn't that far off from what Shedeur ran back at Colorado. There's a natural fit there. When a quarterback already has functional experience inside a similar structural framework, the transition speeds up. He's not trying to learn an entirely foreign language from scratch. He's applying vocabulary he already understands to a slightly different dialect. That matters more than people give it credit for. There's also a bigger backdrop to all of this that's easy to forget when you're just watching stat lines. Shedeur walked into this camp with more outside noise around him than almost any rookie quarterback I can remember in recent memory. Every practice gets picked apart. Every incompletion becomes a headline. Every visit from his father, Deshaun Sanders, turns into its own news cycle, completely separate from anything actually happening on the field. That's an enormous amount of static for a young player to filter out, while also trying to win a legitimate NFL job. And yet, none of that seems to be affecting how he's playing. If anything, he looks more locked in with every practice, like the noise outside the building has made him sharper instead of rattled. And when I look at what Shedeur did with the other weapons around him today, I don't see one player getting fed while everyone else stands around watching. I see a quarterback who's actively working every level of the field. Quick game to keep the chains moving, intermediate throws to keep the defense honest, shots downfield to make defensive coordinators sweat about lining up too aggressive. That's the profile you want in a modern NFL starter, and Cleveland's been searching for exactly that kind of dynamic playmaker under center for what feels like forever. Here's where it gets serious for the front office. Andrew Berry has said repeatedly that performance decides this competition, not draft status, not paycheck, not who arrived in Cleveland first. If that's actually true, and I do believe it is, then Day 3 put real weight behind that promise. You can't preach a performance-based competition and then ignore a quarterback going 80% with 0 picks while the other guy is coughing the ball up. At some point, the tape has to matter more than the narrative that's been written about who's supposed to win this job. Think about the position Berry actually put himself in when he made that promise public. He didn't leave himself any wiggle room to fall back on seniority or salary if the numbers don't support it. That's a bold stance to take with a fan base that's been burned by quarterback decisions again and again over the years, and it means every practice from here forward is going to get measured against that standard. If the front office goes back on that promise now, after everything that's happened through 3 days, it won't just look like a football decision anymore. It'll look like an organization protecting an investment instead of protecting its own credibility. I also think it's worth mentioning what's happening with Dillon Gabriel in all of this, because he's quietly been solid too. He's the only quarterback in that room with a touchdown pass right now, and from what's being reported, he's been steady, if not spectacular, and he's earning more first-team reps because of it. That's a name to keep an eye on as this thing develops, even if he's not generating the same explosive headlines Shedeur is right now. But let's bring this back to the emotional core of the story, because that's really what's driving this whole competition. Cleveland has been chasing stability at the quarterback position for what feels like an entire generation. They've tried veterans, they've tried retreads, they spent enormous resources trying to fix this position, and it's mostly led to frustration and false starts. What Shedeur is doing right now isn't just about winning individual practice reps. It's about giving this fan base a reason to actually believe again. It's about giving these young receivers, guys like Boston and Kinchin and Booty, a quarterback who trusts them enough to let them make plays instead of playing scared and protecting the stat sheet. And that's the part that really gets me. Watching a young quarterback build belief with his teammates in real time, watching receivers run harder because they know the ball is actually coming their way, watching a young offense start to feel alive instead of cautious. That's not something you can coach into existence in a meeting room. That has to be earned on the field, rep by rep, throw by throw. And through 3 days, Shadur Sanders is earning it. So here's where I land on all of this. Nothing is decided. I want to be clear about that, because overreacting to one strong practice is exactly how bad quarterback decisions get made in this league. Watson is still going to get his opportunities, his experience still counts for something, and this competition is far from finished. But if Cleveland is being honest with themselves, they have to start testing Shedeur against tougher competition. Put him against the best defensive personnel they've got. Give him more first-team reps. See if the accuracy, the anticipation, the chemistry with these young receivers holds up when the difficulty gets cranked all the way up. Because right now, the tape is telling a story the front office can't keep ignoring. I want to hear from you on this one. Do you think Shedeur Sanders has done enough through 3 days to start pulling ahead in this quarterback race? Is Deshaun Watson still owed more patience given his experience, or has that window already started closing? And how dangerous could this Sanders to Boston connection actually become if Cleveland keeps feeding it reps? Drop your take, because this quarterback battle in Berea just got a whole lot more interesting, and I don't think it's slowing down anytime soon.